talk to Ambassador John Bolton, former US National Security Advisor in the Trump administration and also former US Ambassador to the United Nations. Ambassador, very good evening. Thank you for joining us here on LBC. What do you think is going to happen over the next few hours?
Well, I don't have the slightest idea, and I would otherwise be bothered by that, except I am completely confident nobody else really knows what's going to happen. I've never seen an election with so many polls this close. That doesn't mean it's going to be close when we know the votes, but it leaves everybody wondering which direction things could go in. And I would just say, because of the electoral college system, you could still end up with a very close vote, but at the end of it, it would look like a fairly big victory for either Harris or Trump in electoral college terms. So we're just going to have to see what happens. Apparently, turnout across the country is pretty high. The first exit polls done for the networks are due just about this time. Maybe another half hour, so people will be looking at them. The only thing I can say on the exit polls is historically they're really wretched, so that doesn't necessarily tell you anything either.
Let's look to the future. Let's assume Donald Trump does prevail. We've been talking this evening about what might happen when he forms his administration, and we're wondering who he would be able to bring in, because first time he brought in lots of people with a lot of experience, like yourself. Virtually all of them didn't last the course for all sorts of different reasons, and we're wondering what the gene pool available is now for Donald Trump if he wins.
Well, maybe this is the time when I say I am Donald Trump's longest serving national security advisor at a rousing 17 months. So that's about par for the course. Look, there's a lot of ambition in Washington and a lot of ambitious people who will put themselves forward. I think it's going to be critical what the group looks like that Trump surrounds himself. But at this point, I don't think there's any way to tell. I am, again, very confident in saying Trump hasn't made up his mind on anything yet. But the one decision he has made, obviously, is his vice presidential candidate. And it's nearly certain that the two questions on the interview sheet were, number one, do you think the 2020 election was stolen? For Trump, the right answer is yes, and the answer no is disqualifying. And second, would you do what I told Mike Pence to do on January the 6th if the situation arose? The right answer to that question for Trump is yes, and the answer no is also disqualifying. So if those questions are put to his senior advisors, cabinet members, and others, you're going to see a very loyalist group of people around him, but not necessarily the people who would serve him best. You don't serve a president when he says, I think I'll jump out of the Washington Monument today because I think I've developed the ability to fly. You don't say, yes, sir, Mr. President, we're going to set that right up. You say, maybe the weather's not so great today. But people who say only yes, sir, will disserve him ultimately and disserve the country.
When you were having conversations with him about various foreign policy and security issues, and you disagreed with the stance that he was taking, what was his reaction?
Well, it depends on the issue, but what we searched for, at least what I searched for, were arguments that got him to the right place. And over time, it became clear the best argument to get him to the right place was to urge that it would be in his political benefit to do so. Now, every president takes politics into account. There's no doubt about it. But none, in my experience, have ever taken them to be really the deciding factor in almost everything. How does this benefit Donald Trump? He was simply unable to distinguish his personal interest from the interest of the country.
Let's turn our attention to Kamala Harris, because it's entirely possible that she could win this election. How do you think her foreign policy might differ from that of President Biden?
Well, the best projection that you can make, I think, is that in some substantial period of time, let's say the first year of a Harris administration, it would look very much like the Biden policy. She did not have foreign policy experience before becoming vice president, but she's now had almost 4 years of sitting in National Security Council meetings, receiving intelligence briefings, meeting with foreign officials. So she's learned the thought process of the Biden administration, which is part of the Democratic Party establishment. My guess is the people she will appoint to senior positions will come from that same establishment. In fact, one of the kind of instant cliches in Washington is Biden was Obama's third term and Harris would be Obama's fourth term. So, but nonetheless, she'll have different people. The circumstances, the environment in the world will change, will require decisions from her. She'll become more comfortable after a time in the office. And her policy at that point could go in a different direction. But in the early days, while she still lacks confidence, I think, and could be confronted with some pretty severe tests in the days right after her inauguration, I think every piece of evidence we have says she'd react a lot like Biden.
Now, I know we're going to lose you in 60 seconds, so final question. I know you've always been a great ally of the United Kingdom. Which of these two candidates would be best for the United Kingdom?
I think from the point of view of understanding the nature of the relationship, it would probably be Harris. I think that Trump has never really understood much about strategic issues generally, and his knowledge, his historical knowledge, is remarkably shallow. I will just tell one story if I can, even if I go over my own deadline here. When I accompanied the president in the spring of 2018, first to the NATO summit in Brussels and then to London to meet with Prime Minister Theresa May, she invited us out to Chequers for a meeting. We had lunch, and in the course of the meeting, this was just after the Skripals had been attacked by the Russians with attempted assassination through chemical weapons. And Mark said, well, my counterpart said, this is very serious. This was an attack with weapons of mass destruction against a nuclear power. And we took it very seriously. And Trump looked at Theresa May and said, does Britain have nuclear weapons? So that's the kind of person you're dealing with in Trump. Maybe by now he'll remember that Britain does have nuclear weapons, but I wouldn't count on it.
And after you'd fallen off your chair, what did you say?
We didn't say anything. Theresa May, I think, reacted very well. She said, yes, Donald.
Wow. What an anecdote. I'm sure you have a few more of those as well. Ambassador, thank you so much for joining us here on LBC. We really appreciate it. That's Ambassador John Bolton.